episode this is? 13, 14, 14, 15? I don't know, whatever. Back again, Mr. Juan Castro. How you doing?
Not bad.
Good, huh?
Yeah.
Good. So let's get into... Well, it was actually one of the things that I wanted to get talking to you about first off was when I was actually watching you play music and you were talking about how your displeasure with Canada Day and stuff came around and they kind of stuck into the colonizer thing, and it's just like, well, is that kind of is it that holiday in particular? And I thought about it and it's like, well, you probably don't really celebrate any of the holidays in Canada because they're all attached to some level of oppression or something.
It was interesting. So I met this really cool person recently. They got back from the UK, and we met up at a show, and at one point in the night, she was like, Juan, how did you get so cool? And I was like, look, there's actually a very boring side of me, actually. And then they invited me to a Halloween party, and I was like, so this is where my boring side comes out. Because I don't actually do Halloween. And I try not to not celebrate any organized sort of capitalism-infused holiday. Just because it doesn't resonate with me to just do something to be part of a tribe, or also the other sides of it, for example, especially Halloween, since it's around the corner. The amount of costumes that get thrown out every year, just worn once or twice, maybe 3 nights a year, right? So I mean, if you're gonna show up at random things wearing your costume, then it seems more worth it. But I'm not gonna do that, and I'm not gonna pretend like I'm into that just because I want to be part of the group, kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and it's like that with other things, but that's just one example. So I don't think that, for example, Thanksgiving, what you were saying, to make a day Thanksgiving, it's why are you not giving thanks every day already? And what is this
Yeah, your gratitude's supposed to be a daily practice.
Yeah, and it's no, there's a part of it where it's a consumerist side where you get all these things, you feast, it's a ritual, a celebration, and you can have those on your own. You don't have to subscribe to a day where everyone does it just because you want to feel a part of a bigger thing, a bigger tribe that's going, kind of consciousness that's going on.
Yeah. Well, that one in particular too, Thanksgiving, there's been a lot of controversy that's been brought up again about it in the last couple of years because of it's well, what are we actually celebrating here? Mm-hmm. The pilgrims that took over the natives, but they got together for one meal.
And
one time, or is that actually what happened, or is what are we celebrating? Right?
And there's depictions of colonizers as these heroes, these explorers, and yes, there's an aspect of their identity that could be seen as that.
Yeah.
But the reality is I've liked using the analogy of a pen.
Yeah.
Because a pen has many uses and many sides to it, and hence the truth of a pen is more than just it's a writing utensil. I could say it's a writing utensil. I could say I could use this to write beautiful things that can heal, even.
Mm-hmm.
I could also say that you can use that to write terrible things that could hurt and damage. And I could even go as far as saying that you can use a pen to kill someone. And
directly or indirectly, yeah.
Yeah. And so it's interesting that especially with that Andrew Tate controversy as well, that if you just take one thing, that one part where I said you can use a pen to kill someone, you could make me out to look like a crazy person as well.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, yeah, that's just
So
it.
there's-
With clever editing, with the last one we did together and whatever we're going to say today, I mean, I could make either of us look like villains or heroes.
Yeah, exactly, right? And so it works both ways.
Yeah.
Right? And so the underlying principle is that truth is way more vast than just like tunnel vision.
Yeah. Well, and even to that point, I mean, the part of the thing that other people seem to kind of forget about too, that a lot of the actual like Thanksgiving stuff, just to backtrack a bit, is that there was a lot of people that were Puritans, and they lived like a really non-violent, didn't care sort of thing like that, but they couldn't live that way in Europe because they were ostracized or hunted and they never fought back for anything, so they came to the New World. And I mean, a lot of, well, from Saskatchewan west, moving sort of thing like that, a lot of it was founded by the Doukhobors, like the Russians that were basically forced out of their own country. And that's why when we go into Grandmaster's place in BC, well, there's borscht everywhere. You know, these were all these puritanical people that didn't want anything to do. Saskatchewan, my parents couldn't buy alcohol on the side of the city that they lived in. They had to drive across the river to buy alcohol in the 70s. Because it's like, it was founded as a temperance colony, like a dry, church kind of colony sort of thing too. So it's just like, they weren't here to take and to steal and stuff like that too. They just wanted to be away from their own version of oppression, sort of thing too.
Yeah, and then again, like, that's also just one part of the greater truth, right? Because their ability to create that safe haven for themselves here was also founded on a lot of genocide.
Yeah.
Right. So there's like that's what I mean. Like there's
no, it's just a big open flat country. Nothing is there, but there's lots of animals. Like,
yeah,
really, nobody was here ever? Okay, but things people didn't care. Their lives were hard enough, so it's just like, okay, well, this is my farm now, or we'll build a town over by this river, sort of thing like that. But yeah, ignorance is bliss in certain times. Then as we get more and more technology, and we're, the internet is great because it's connecting all of our knowledge bases together. Like, oh, we weren't the first people here, hey?
Yeah.
Shit.
But like we were kind of talking about earlier, like you still see people with tunnel vision, like so much, that it's kind of crazy that like even though we have the technology to, like where you're saying, connect our thoughts more to create a more whole truth, it's still happening. So that's what's really interesting, and that's what has been something that's been coming up in conversation a lot as well lately. Just the ability to take the whole truth without getting caught up in tunnel vision of different forms, and that oftentimes gets tied to identity. And identity politics and religion identity, like dogmatic identity.
Well, the other part of it is too is that we're for some reason not allowed to change teams, or we're not allowed to apologize.
That's what you mentioned earlier. Like oftentimes we'll be like, how did you put it?
If you're let's say you're on the left or the right, or you're blue or red, or you're pink or yellow, like regardless sort of thing like that. It's like, I'm on this side. It's like, I really agree with a lot of your ideas, though.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're not allowed to do that because it's like if people on my team hear about that, they'll throw me out.
Yep. And it's interesting because I had a friend who, before COVID, we're still friends, but before COVID, she was a huge supporter of the Green Party, of the NDP, and any party basically that had a lot of green sustainable initiatives in as part of their campaign or whatever. And what was really interesting is that after COVID, like a few weeks ago, this same friend posted about how they just joined the UCP.
United Conservative Party?
Yeah. And I was like shocked. I was like how? And I confronted them, and it was like they were telling me a script. And then I thought back about how involved they were in the conspiracy COVID and like all this stuff, and then it just reaffirmed that like this like global event, this pandemic, was a tool as well to divide people and like put them into like those separate categories.
Yeah.
Where they like almost like have these leaders that the UCP leader, the first day got criticized for something that they said.
Yeah, they said the unvaccinated were the worst treated people in history.
Yeah, and so what that shows, right away when I heard that, I was like, no wonder my friend is like now subscribing to this ideology, political ideology.
Yeah.
She was so into the conspiracy about she's unvaccinated, blah, blah, blah. So what is this political leader doing? Speaking directly to this group, making them feel like she's the only one hearing them. So what are they going to do? Oh, I'm going to vote for her.
Yeah. Finally, a politician that has my back.
Finally, a politician that has my back, right?
Yeah.
And meanwhile, everyone that has half a brain, I mean, not to be too judgmental, but
however, fuck those idiots.
but I mean, it's just like people that like think very, very critically and are very skeptical, and oftentimes subscribe to the scientific method.
Yeah.
Don't vote. Those are the people who are not voting because they're like, what's the point?
It's a rigged system.
It's a very restrictive system.
Yeah.
In the way that it manipulates those biases into vote gathering.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why like a thing that's been coming up in conversation is alternatives to that.
Yeah, but well, and with that said though too, I mean, more often than not, it'd be nice if we could actually just do a full-on vote of no confidence. Because more often than not, there has never in history been a single leader that's fully done what most people want.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, partly when they get into power, they don't do what they say anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Is the other part of it.
Yeah.
But the other part of it is too is just that there's no single solution for all of it. Is the other thing, because it doesn't matter what any one group does, there'll be people that bitch about it. So
here's why I found all of this happens, and it's because we're told that this system is democracy, but it's not. It's populism, and it's like the Roman Republic wearing a different cloak, where it's like the same lady wearing a different dress. That's the metaphor that I like to use,
pretty accurate.
Yeah, and the reason why people get into a position of power and don't, like what you're saying, oftentimes don't do as they say, is because they're not experts in their fields. Like if we had actual experts in their fields solving problems, and it became a problem solution politics rather than a party politics,
yeah,
we'd get a lot closer to making progress, because then it wouldn't be, I'm voting for this solution or this leader because of my lineage and my biases and the way that they're speaking to those biases. But it's like, okay, so we have these experts in like these fields that all apply to this problem that we're trying to solve, and they've come up with these ways of solving it. Which is the best solution?
Yeah.
And that way we get a lot closer to unbiased solutions that are not influenced by private interests that can oftentimes be labeled lobbying or donating by corporations to government.
Yeah. The only problem with that is that most of our problems are never what party you're on. Almost all of our things are the rich versus the poor. Doesn't matter how many times we try to say that it's not, or it's whatever, all these artificial lines we draw between each other, or relate our race, our vaccination status, or whatever sort of thing like that. It's the rich putting divisions between us so that we fight each other instead of them.
Yeah, and so, but the way that happens in politics is like we have these opposing parties with leaders that are not experts in the fields of like the niches that need problem like solving or whatever.
Yeah. Like the Belgian health minister is 350 pounds.
Yeah, and a lot of the times we get caught in the way that these politicians speak to our like people's biases, and that's the reason why. So the reason why I say it's populism is because they will speak to those biases. Then people vote for like the person that speaks best to their own biases, and then in the end, the reason why nothing gets done is because, like what you were saying, it's the rich against the poor, and the government itself is just like this middleman that is protecting the rich. In the past, it was the council and the army that protected the kings and queens, and now it's the military as an armed force of the political system that protects the wealthy.
Yeah, well, not even just the military, our local police and stuff like that, because it's that constant, keep your chin up, keep everything clean and tidy, or there'll be issues. We have a law for everything. You could be fined or imprisoned for everything if you just don't do what we say.
Yeah, and so that's in a way like that makes me think of Nietzsche's argument of the Ubermensch, and how the weak suppress the strong as a way to maintain power.
Yeah. Because
they know, like, in terms of numbers, if the masses united in consciousnly, they would have no chance to retain their power.
Yeah.
And that's why division is such a useful tool in many ways. And it's like I think maybe we touched upon this on the last talk that we had, which was the division between men and women, and that's like a really interesting thing that's been happening also with Andrew Tate as being a guy that created this controversy and like had so many male followers, and it made me really curious to look into it, and I found out some cool things about what he was actually saying, because like what we talked in the beginning, if you take just a clip, you can make someone look like someone they're not.
Yeah, I honestly didn't follow any of the Andrew Tate stuff, because all I heard was people yelling and screaming on both sides of what it is, and
same.
And I didn't even bother looking into it, because it's just like I already have enough time living in recreational outrage, which a friend of mine pointed out to me like after we went for lunch when we did the onesie run. It's like, why do you focus on some of this stuff? Like, yeah, it doesn't affect most of my daily life. Why do I even spend time thinking about it half the time? It's part of it, sort of thing. But with that said, though, too, the reason why people are having emotional reactions to whatever Andrew Tate said, which I'm assuming is some level of misogyny, sort of.
Yeah, definitely. That's most of the things that I heard, and I'm like the things that I heard in the clips that I saw. I was like, yeah, like they have reasons to ban him. They have reasons to speak out against him.
Yeah.
But after he was banned and they had kind of blown over a little bit, I was like, huh. And he did that like interview afterwards, speaking about what happened and the banning and all that. So I was like, I'm curious to see what he has to say, just because I've only seen small clips.
Yeah.
And I want to know the whole truth.
Yeah.
So I like to keep in mind that quote by Aristotle that goes, "It is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without fully agreeing with it." And that's the mindset that I went into it, and it's really interesting what he had to say. Yeah,
for sure. Well, I mean, there's lots of ways to disagree on stuff. I mean, you and I disagreed last time, where half the time we're on the internet about stuff, chatting back and forth, and it's like, you sure about that? I'm gonna have to come and sit down with you and like I kind of understand the direction you're going for this, but it's like a lot of these ideas a lot of the time are good in theory, you know, but in practice it's like you can't make them work because there's always going to be a small percentage of the population, no matter what you do, is going to go against the grain.
Yeah, well, that's the thing that's really interesting, because I always like to think of Jack Fresco and his story of how he dismantled a KKK group from the inside in a month, and the way that he talks about it, and the way that he started off just being a part of the group, and then strategically befriending the leader of the group, and then gaining his trust, and then starting to teach him basic science.
Yeah.
Like showing him cool things through science. And he's like, oh, look, this guy has some knowledge.
Yeah.
Then by gaining the trust of the group, then he started to teach all of them basic science. And through science and logic, in a month, he made them realize, oh shit, racism is wrong.
Yeah.
And so it's I totally understand, and like there, because like sometimes the way that I explain like a certain idea is like is once again just one part of a greater truth. And the greater truth is that it takes a lot of different aspects to be addressed at the same time in order for tangible, practical transformation to happen.
Yeah.
So these ideas about reforming government would only realistically take place if, for example, people were truly empowered to think critically and have a healthy self-esteem, healthy self-image, and that goes oftentimes beyond the pride and fear that comes from, like we were talking about, grabbing onto all these things that we want to identify so that we can feel safe and secure in who we are. You know, I'm this political party, I'm this religion, I'm this type of person, you know, all those kinds of things that we gather. So a healthy self-esteem and a healthy self-image would, in a sense, be able to look at that and be like, there's parts of these things that we don't require so that we can actually see the whole truth. And so once that happens, then we can have people be able to clue into, oh, maybe there are options to these political systems that we have. We've just been trained to think that there aren't. And
I don't know if it's that way though, because I think part of it is that regardless of how much knowledge or information's out there, some people are going to decipher it differently. You know, and an analogy to say that, like, okay, well, there's types of food that some people really enjoy eating, right? But some of it I wouldn't want to eat. I mean, I eat everything, so it's maybe a bad example for me in particular. But there's certain things where people's tastes or interests or ideas simply do not line up with other people, right? So like, well, somebody that's like a staunch conservative is typically fairly Christian religious, and I mean this part of the world anyways, sort of thing like that. So it's like, well, if they're a conservative, that means they're anti-abortion, like they're pro-life, sort of thing like that. They're, you know, you start listing all these things off, whatever. But it's just like, well, that's because it's part of the way they see the world. And regardless of how much more information, how well balanced, how calmly it's discussed with them, like somebody like Ben Shapiro sat down and talked with Russell Brand, and they're very opposing on a lot of things. Yeah. But at the same time, I think they called it respectfully disagreeing, because it was just a comfortable conversation where two grown men made their points.
So this makes me think of a little clip I saw of this influencer. I think his Instagram is Nas Daily, and this clip was about the saddest thing he's ever seen. And he's been making content on the conflict in like Palestine and like the opposing sides of the story, because oftentimes, because they're so close, like there's people that are born from one side are born in the opposing context, and so they get this perspective of like being surrounded by the enemy to a certain degree, and it's like vice versa, right? But this little clip was focused on how he met this young boy. He's like, I love, the little boy was like, I love your videos because like I also want peace. And then a grown-up was like, no, that's not what you gotta think. You actually have to we have to fight for our freedom and defeat the enemy. And then a couple years later, the influencer saw the same boy and he was repeating the same thing that the grown-up was saying. And so this is why, like, we talked about primary prevention methods as a way to try to prevent those kind of things from happening, because those are thoughts that are like being put in someone's head that are leading to these contexts that then later on it's like, yeah, it's harder to fix a broken man than to create or raise a healthy human. And that's kind of like the issue that you're bringing forth. And yeah, like you're right, definitely. To change Ben Shapiro's mind, to change Russell Brand's mind, these are grown-ass men. These are grown-ass men that have been, influenced by so many things that each of them have created their own self-identity. And one might be more of a whole reality and a whole truth than the other, but it doesn't change the fact that to be able to transform either mindset, either identity, would take a lot more work than if it was done at a young age.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm such an advocate for investing in primary prevention methods, and that's why I also have written a proposal to the Education Board of Alberta proposing a very specific reform to the curriculum that includes all the research that we've done on how to build a healthy self-esteem, all the research that we've done so far, scientifically into psychology and sociology and behavioral sciences, on how to create healthier relationship dynamics of all different kinds, like friendships, intimate relationships, family dynamics, all kinds of things. We have all this knowledge that we've been gathering that we're not putting into practice where it matters the most. And that's part of the reason why it's almost inconceivable to think of a world where like people can not just disrespectfully agree, but come to add to each other's thought process, be able to accept when a truth is beyond their own identity, and through that realization of a greater truth, redefine our own identities as something greater than just each other.
Yeah, I think, well, for a lot of that too, I think there's a lot of people that do enjoy the growth and the beauty of having the level of technology that we do nowadays is that you have a chance to be more and different than you are every decade, as opposed to even 40 years ago, let's say. Like you were born and raised to be a farmer, that's pretty much who you are. You're born and raised to be, a city person that's working in the stock market or whatever, because your dad did that or whatever sort of thing like that, or like your family's a family of cops sort of thing like that.
Yeah,
it's just that now that we have so much more access to technology and the ability to interconnect, and how there's so much more going on in the world that we can work into. There's a lot more that can be done, and it's, I think, comparably to where we are now to like 100 years ago, we are living in a utopia.
To a certain degree, I feel like it's very artificial and very strategically made to disempower people in those specific areas. And like, I hadn't even thought about this, but like, I've been thinking a lot about how part of the reason why we don't make any progress or reforms that benefit everyone, not just a few, is the disempowerment of men. This is something that I one of the truths that I picked up, because like watching Andrew Tate, for example, I don't agree with everything he says, but I picked out a few truths that I'm like, that is very true. And it's the disempowerment of men benefits the people in power.
Yep.
And one of the most blatant ways in which the disempowerment of men is real is the statistics on how the level of suicides. Like, men make up almost 80% of all suicides.
We're number one.
Yeah, and it's crazy because at the same time that this is happening, misandry has been normalized through this movement that originally, like the first two waves of feminism, all about equality, all about, you know, creating a world where everyone has accessibility to the same opportunities, the same kind of empowerment, the same kind of, and now it's been infiltrated with this normalization of misandry that comes from an understandable place, because there has been generational trauma that men have caused that needs to be acknowledged. But it doesn't help. There's no science out there that says that hating on someone blatantly and putting them down and treating them like trash, calling them trash, calling them incompetent, even if it's somewhat true, it doesn't help anyone grow. If anyone can find me a piece of research that shows that putting someone down to the ground helps them grow, I would like to see that.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to have some level of struggle or something like that. I mean, it's nice to have something to work towards. Like, life can't be extra easy, because, I mean, as it is, life is really easy and comfortable for a lot of us, and that's why obesity has become a problem. But at the same token, though, too, like, there's, I mean, well, in the same direction, like how the left has gone so far to the left that they're becoming racist again. It's like, well, no, we have to point out all the racists to lift up the ones that are put down. It's like, equality means we're all the same. Your skin color should not matter. Because I look more white than you, I have to be down now because 10 years ago I was up from you because your skin's slightly darker? Or is it maybe because we're actually, you know, decent, hardworking people trying to be a part of society? That's what matters. How much melanin is in our skin is irrelevant. Isn't that more important? You know, and that's where I thought it's just like, well, again, like, if you're talking about equality, then you shouldn't be thinking about putting people up on top of anybody for any reason. We should all be the same is the idea of equality, right? Hence the word equal.
Exactly. And so that's what's really interesting as well, when you bring up the concept of comfortability, and also combining that with what we talked about in terms of primary prevention methods, which is targeting issues before they happen at a relational, psychological level in infancy. And if you look at how much money is spent for entertainment for that age group, how much money is spent on, well, video games is like another form of entertainment, right? And where are all the boys going? Where are all the boys, like, finding a place of connection? It's a place that is outside of reality. Generally speaking. You know, there are, you know, guys that, like, bond and whatever in context in real life, but even then, it's not like it's taking them towards a more empowered place. It's it's almost like a cacophony of idealized empowerment that is not based in anything real. Otherwise, men wouldn't be killing themselves in the rate that they are.
Well, that kind of somewhat speaks to our animalistic nature and how close we are still to all the animals that we live with, sort of thing. Is the fact that there's how many of these video games in particular are about murder and, you know, teams killing each other, sort of thing like that. You know, it's what's my kill count on that, or my kill ratio, sort of thing like that for a lot of these games. Well, it's good in a sense because even since the 90s, they'd said violent abuse crimes and stuff like that, it was gone down like in record numbers because whatever aggressions and stuff that you can get out, you can do it into a video game instead of against an actual person and causing physical harm. But with that said, like you said, it also escaping reality then, sort of thing too, where some people can make great money at it, but it's like you're not living in the real world anymore.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what's like also disempowering a whole generations of men to one degree or another. You know, video games can be fun.
Yeah.
Video games can be a good escape from reality, but that's really like all you can make all these arguments about how it can be beneficial, potentially have some truth to them.
Yeah.
But on a greater scheme, that's one of the parts of the issues, because there's also so much disempowerment in terms of how men deal with desire and their emotions. Some of the most powerful things that I've learned in terms of communicating my emotions in a healthy way, I've learned in books geared towards women, written towards women. Even in books that I've read on masculinity, that focus on a healthy aspect of masculinity, they don't even touch upon some of these strategies on just simple communication strategies, as simple as being like, I need 10 minutes or I need 20 minutes to clear my head. I need however time I need to clear my head so I can communicate properly, instead of subscribing to the idea that we have to talk about an issue right now to solve it. Even something as simple as that.
Yeah.
Someone as educated and as woke as myself didn't learn that until like a month and a half ago, or a month ago.
Yeah.
And this is something that has been incredibly helpful in dealing with difficult situations where emotions can be triggered.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, it's one of those fairly simple concepts that I'm sure you've probably heard several times throughout your life, but it had to be put into the right context or hit you at the right time in your life where it really clicks in, because you've been a good listener for lots of stuff. I mean, we've had a lot of conversations at the studio or out for a coffee or whatever sort of thing like that about really interesting things, and like you said, you've had, well, like most people that try to be better, they continually grow and are open to new ideas fairly often. But with that said though too, you get going into a wave for so long sort of thing like that too. It's just like, well, now I'm taking too much time to become open and listening and aware of sort of things like that I've turned into a doormat, which I've done myself, sort of thing too, right? So there's also, it needs to be a balance on where those types of ideas end up, sort of thing too, because you don't want to just be a people pleaser and give yourself up completely to make everybody else comfortable around you too.
Yeah.
Right? So.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So and communicating your emotions and your needs are a huge part of that, but that takes skill. That takes knowing how to do it sometimes, because if we don't know and we're in a situation where we're triggered and we think we can solve it if we like sit together, oftentimes in a triggered state, whether it's mostly anger, because that's the easiest emotion for men to feel, instead of sadness. Even if you're sad, even if you're hurt and you want to cry, it's easier to be angry as a man. I mean, you know, you could say this about a woman as well to a certain degree, but societally we've been conditioned into this place where like that's what men experience most often. And so when that happens, even if it's a place of hurt, it's going to be expressed as anger. And what happens when people get angry? Their frontal cortex shuts off.
Yeah, fight or flight kicks in.
Hence, situations get worse than they could.
Yeah.
And hence, you know, all the issues that men have with controlling their emotions that lead to people getting hurt in different ways. Whether it's sexual assault, whether it's domestic abuse.
Well, even what I've heard from some women that have been in rough relationships where they've dated some guys that were physically abusive, some were psychologically abusive, and almost all the time, most of those women say, I wish he would just hit me. I know how to deal with that. But it's like he doesn't talk to me, or he doesn't do this or that. It's like I don't know what to do with that. It'd be easier.
And that's another form of the same coin. That's another side of the same coin, right?
Yeah.
Because what you don't do is as bad as what you do.
You said doo-doo.
Yeah, but it's true. You know, neglect is as painful physiologically as getting beat up.
Yeah, and that was, well, and speaking about physiology, I mean, that was a huge thing after, you know, staying 6 feet away from each other for 2 years. You know, getting out and going to be able to go hug somebody or go, like I'm doing dance classes now. Partly because I need like physical contact with people because I've been so afraid to get anywhere near somebody sort of thing like that too. And it's just like in general, like I know you should just be going and hugging whoever you feel like sort of thing. It still has to be consensual to a degree, you know, but that's the other thing. It's like, it's a non-romantic or non-sexual level of intimacy that we all need. We're very societal creatures. We need to have physical contact with each other. You know, it's even like eye contact. Like we're maintaining pretty good eye contact, but it's like a lot of the time it's like it's more than that. More often than not, like when I leave here today, we'll probably have a hug. Just because it's like there's a level of appreciation and physical contact that makes us all feel good about ourselves.
Definitely, yeah.
You know, it helps relax your cortisol levels, like your parasympathetic nervous system, like kicks in, sort of thing like that. So you're not just stressed and there's everything cool, calm. It's like, yeah, just take it easy, you know, because we're, well, unlike the animals, we don't shake it off. You know, like I've made that comment a handful of times, like where an animal gets attacked, like
and
a
that's
zebra or a bird.
That's the thing. We're repressing our emotions because naturally that's what would happen in nature. We would find ways to deal with those emotions and still express them, but like in a way that we can fully move through them, not like push them down, so that we don't experience them. So I recently actually saw a post that was very accurate in terms of describing this, and it's like this idealization of certain emotions, and what's the word? Demonization of other ones. Maybe that's like the closest I can get to right now.
Sure.
But holistic healing is about saying no, there's no better or worse, we're all allowed to feel what we feel. There's just healthy ways of communicating that, healthy ways of allowing ourselves to feel those emotions and owning them as part of who we are, but also realizing that they're either signs of a place that we need to grow in communicating our needs, our desires, or a chance to get to trust ourselves as well.
Yeah. Well, like you said too. I mean, with the whole social scripting, like you were talking about there earlier, with men are not supposed to cry or whatever sort of thing too. That's definitely something we've pushed on ourselves. But I mean, also the point that women have to also understand that the reason why we're not dealing with our emotions properly is because we haven't been given the space, sometimes by women, sometimes by their men in our lives, to work on them, to understand them. And also all we're getting is bitched and moaned at about what's going on, sort of thing like that. But it's like, but you can't cry either.
But that's exactly what I mean about like how this third wave of feminism has been infiltrated as a way to continue to keep men in this cage. That yes, like we said, we've put ourselves in there, but at the same time, it doesn't help if we're not giving the space to be able to grow in those aspects, and also it doesn't help that we're not only not being given the space, but also we're being called trash. We're being like put down to the max. You know, like it's like, you know, if there was a gas pedal, you know, feminism right now is pushing it full throttle to like the hate on men, and but there's also like a kind of light at the end of the tunnel that I'm seeing a lot. Both me and Kat had experiences on opposite sides of the spectrum. We were both like, Kat overheard some men talking about, like, two friends being like, dude, that journal that you gave me is really helping me out. You know, men supporting men.
Yep.
Is like, wow, there's hope, right? And then also, I overheard a conversation between female presenting people that where we're talking, and they're like, but you know, women can be very toxic as well, so you have to take that into account. And I was like, oh my goodness, like we're making progress on both sides to hold ourselves accountable where we need to.
Yeah.
Because neither is perfect. We can't start making up one group to be like better than the other, because that's where most of the problems in society stem from. People thinking that they're better than others.
Yeah.
In one way or another.
Yeah, you were wronged by somebody, so it's their fault, instead of taking accountability for your role and why you were wronged.
Yeah.
Like, don't get me wrong, some people get just shit on for no reason. But more often than not, in business, in romance, in sports, in social activities, going to the grocery store, I mean, there's tons of aspects of life where you can just be happy, you know, put your best foot forward, sort of thing like that. No, we're not all going to have a good day, and you can't just plaster a smile on, sort of thing like that too. But I mean, if you present life with happiness, or, you know, with at least some sort of positivity in your life, it's way easier to deal with a lot of things. Mm-hmm. You know, and that's the thing that I thought was kind of interesting. I'm talking with a friend about this yesterday, about how there's so many things that women want in their lives or their relationships, or anything like that, but they never talk about it. They just expect men to know what they're thinking. But it's like, we don't think like you in the first place. Mm-hmm. So like, how do you, like, if you're not even really sure about what it is that you want, how am I supposed to know that? Mm-hmm. And then men in general we're fixers. Mm-hmm. You know, we see an issue, or you have something that you want to talk about. Mm-hmm. Well, you're presenting it as a problem. It's like, well, men want to find a solution to problems. We don't want to just talk about these things.
Yeah.
You know, so and that's another part of where the male-female dichotomy is not supposed to be a dichotomy. It's supposed to be synergy, where we're working together to understand.
Yeah, complementing, because like what you're saying, the fact that we don't think alike, we do think alike in a lot of ways.
Yeah. But
we can also be very different in a lot of other ways as well, in the way that we deal with desire, in the way that we deal with emotions. Yeah. And some of them have been, you know, socialized into us. Yeah. Like the fact that women are socialized to have support groups that help them deal with their emotions. Yeah. Maybe that's why they're not committing suicide as much as men are. Wow, what a concept, that we can have, you know, a safe space where we can express ourselves, feel supported, yeah, and also potentially grow from that.
Well, even just that phrase, men's help group. Some people laugh at the concept, which I think is ridiculous, because, like, well, what, men are not allowed to have problems? Yeah. We're only supposed to be like physically strong,
and just
like,
tough it up.
strong.
Yeah, like, yeah. How do you expect that to happen if we don't have a support group? That's the thing. Yeah. And that's one of the biggest lessons for me that happened from last year, you know. There was a lot of positive things about, you know, my 4-year relationship that I had, that was, you know, kind of semi-committed, but there was a lot of things that I learned about myself in terms of like how, there can be aspects of femininity that are very toxic, that are normalized.
Yeah, and that's a phrase nobody ever really talks about, is toxic femininity.
Yeah,
toxic women that you pointed out before. It's like, we all know them.
Yeah,
we've all seen them. Same thing. Like, we've been in the grocery store. We've been playing sports. We've been doing things in life where it's just like, ugh. Yeah, it has nothing even to do with the fact that she's a woman, or that it's regardless of race, religion, whatever, sort of thing like that. Yeah, it's like, that's just not a good human.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just not a good way of dealing with certain things. Like, because to a certain degree, like, and this is not to hate on, you know, my ex-partner or whatever, but but I mean, like, it was really interesting to see how, like, my willingness to be the best that I could, combined with, certain insecurities that led to her making me feel bad for having female relationships outside of our intimate relationship that were platonic.
That's weird. Well, we'll get into that.
It's like the opposite of toxic masculinity, right? Like, where like toxic masculinity would be like, you can't have any guy friends, very direct, very like cutthroat, very toxic as well.
Yeah.
Toxic femininity is passive aggressive and makes you feel bad to the point where, like, because you're a good person and you want to prove yourself as a partner, which is dumb.
Yeah.
In like retrospect,
you're spending a lot of time with your friend.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, you're like, like, I'm not gonna name names, but this. Oh, you're like hanging out with her again. Oh, like those kind of like passive aggressive comments and like that kind of thing.
Is it not okay with that I go with hang out with this person? No, it's fine.
It's fine. Yeah. Why are they talking about you about this thing? Isn't that something that they should talk about with their partner? That kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And then it like leads into this like very toxic dynamic that I'm like, how did I not see this also? But it's like love can blind us, like romanticizing chemistry can blind us to certain degrees, right?
Well, for sure. And the part of that though too is that if somebody has trust issues like that, that's something that they have to deal with. Because I've had that from more than one girlfriend, and same thing, like they're like, oh, you're spending time with this person or however sort of thing like that. It's like, yeah, they've been my friend for over a decade.
Yeah.
Like, is there a problem?
Yeah, and the thing is, like, I'm not gonna say that like I was perfect in that relationship either,
Yeah, but
because the thing is, like, when that happens, then as someone that likes to have equality, I'm like, like, if you're gonna do that, then why are you doing this? And to a certain degree, I never wanted to restrict my ex-partner, and they had male friends that I was totally fine with. But if I had a history with one of my female friends, it was a huge issue.
Yeah.
If I even took a moment to process the fact that I didn't know that there was a history and then found out, apparently that was a huge issue too. Even if I just needed a moment to be like, oh, what? That was a thing? I have no idea.
Yeah.
Even if I don't make a big deal about it, it's still a big deal.
Yeah.
Just because I'm like, oh, I had no idea, and like, I need a moment to process this kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So it's those like double standards, and like, I've been learning so much about like trust and like myself, and how like one of the reasons why I require honesty in like all the connections that I have, especially intimate ones, is because like once trust is broken to one degree or another, and there's not that like commitment to be fully honest, like I'd much rather be like, so I met this person and like we're connecting, but it feels like more than just a friendship. I'd much rather hear that than be like, oh, it's just a friend.
Yeah, for sure.
Even though it's harder to handle to a certain degree, because you have to realize yourself and be secure enough in yourself if you want to allow that person to explore that.
Yeah.
Because you know your own value, you know who you are. Why is that connection, why is that interaction going to change anything about me?
Yeah.
But it's so that's not easy.
Well, that's where it moves right into what I was thinking about too, like how the thought or idea comes up that it's like, well, it's not you that I don't trust. It's like, well, yes, it is, because you wouldn't have anything to worry about otherwise. They could hit on me all day, or they could do whatever sort of thing like that to try to entice me into something that's more than just a friendship. If I fall for it, that's where that would be my fault then. So then you'd be valid in not trusting me.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like I said, I'm with you, and that's what the relationship is.
Yeah.
Anything outside of that, that is a trust issue you have to deal with. It has nothing to do with me whatsoever, or any other partner you have in the future.
And I think that's where monogamy can like have a lot of easy avenues to fall into toxicity, like being toxic.
Yeah.
Because if we're gonna be honest, like we come from primates. No primate is monogamous.
Yeah.
And you made a comment earlier about like how like we have a very animalistic side to us that can lead us into like certain avenues as well of like escapism. And I recently have been rereading a book on freedom by Osho, and he makes a very interesting comment on how as humanity has stopped being an animal, but it hasn't yet become fully human, and that's why we require laws.
Yeah.
Because we're just in this limbo of people not being able to act from the heart fully and getting lost in like a lot of either animalistic behaviors that are not properly expressed, not properly dealt with, that lead us to have laws that enforce some sort of control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's like Yuval Harari talks about that in that Sapiens book that he wrote however many years ago now.
I heard that's good, yeah.
It's a really good book. But one of the issues with that is simply the fact, like you said, that we're still an animal, but we're not fully evolved humans yet either. The big part of that is that everything else that's a dominant part of the food chain, like a shark or a bear or a wolf, whatever, they've had hundreds of thousands, millions of years to evolve into being the apex predator or the top of their chain, or whatever, other examples of those things. Is where we were middle of the food chain until 50,000 years ago or so.
Yeah.
And basically within a blink of an eye, we've been thrust to the top. And because we're the smartest creature on the planet as well, we can time travel basically constantly. Our whole life is living in the regrets of a lot of the time the things that we didn't do in the past, or worries about what we could possibly do or screw up in the future. As where a lot of other animals don't have the issues that we're allowing ourselves to have. And we haven't evolved to that point where we've gotten to the point where we can just calmly, logically function within this world, because we're still stuck in our circadian rhythms, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But we need to eat certain types of foods just to exist. In a city, if our food supply broke off, within 3 days it would be absolute chaos in the city.
Yeah.
So like we're very close to that still.
And so going back to the avenues of how monogamy can become toxic in not being able to acknowledge all those factors that we just addressed, right, about ourselves as humans.
Yeah.
It's the expectations that we set up that really hurt us.
Yeah.
Is the expectations that we set up that cause like amplified trust issues, because it's kind of a lie to a degree that we're able to commit to one person. Maybe not that part, the commitment part, but the part that we are gonna find only them attractive and want to connect with only them for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, which some people can, and good on them if they can make it work.
To a degree, because like what you're saying is like part of that monogamous structure and the label that's been given of holy union to that. And if you can't do it, then it's unholy, and you failed to a certain degree. But the people that make it work, it's not like they don't feel attracted to other people.
For sure.
It's not like they don't get, flirted with, or, what you were saying, like a person trying to influence them to connect with them outside of their relationship to a certain degree. It's just that they've been very good at not giving into that.
Yeah.
but it doesn't mean that it's not there,
Oh,
and it
sure.
doesn't mean that, like, to one degree or another, they don't feel the desire to follow that. It's just we've deemed monogamous relationship holy union, so maybe those people are just like so incentivized by that, maintaining that holiness, that they have enough self-control to not give into that. That doesn't mean that feeling those things and maybe even giving into them in a ethical way of communicating is wrong either.
Yeah, for sure. And that, well, I mean, as the statistics go now, I'm pretty sure it's something like upwards of 50% of marriages fail. And even the ones that do stick together, are they actually happy?
Everyone that you ask that's been married for a real long time make some sort of a joke about being tired of that person.
For sure, yeah. For sure they do. But at the same time, though, too, it is so heart-melting to see people in their 80s like, holding hands and like kissing and stuff. Like, it's so amazing, because it's like, the reason why that's beautiful, it's not because, you know, that moment of lovey-dovey sort of stuff like that. It's because of all the 50 years of bullshit that they put up with each other, and they still like each other.
Yeah.
That's the impressive part.
Yeah.
Because that was one thing that my mom had made a point of. It's like, well, yeah, all that other stuff, like the lustful parts or whatever relationship, well, that's easy. You're driven to do a lot of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But love is like washing dirty underwear, taking care of them when they're sick, having them take care of you when you're sick. You know, like not making rent or something happen, but it's like, it's okay, we'll figure it out together kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and the question that I like pose to that is like, why can't that be a thing while still integrating parts of us that are still very natural for us to experience? You know, because there's like such a thing as primary relationships where like you can deconstruct that idea of like, you know, being monogamous and still retain certain aspects of like long-term commitment, but still allow for that greater truth about ourselves as human to be explored and to be experienced and expressed.
Yeah.
Because honestly, like some of the greatest moments of growth that I've had have happened within those non-monogamous contexts where extreme honesty and healthy communication are required in order to explore something.
Doesn't it feel awesome to be kind of out there and feeling that vulnerability where you almost feel naked in a sense? Like physically you almost feel naked because you're putting all of your actual thoughts and ideas out there, and you're not sure what the answer is going to be, sort of thing like that too. But it's like, I would rather have full, or the best I can express myself to honesty, because there's always something lost in translation, or what you actually think and what comes out of your mouth exactly, sort of thing, or how it's interpreted. Mm-hmm. But in general, it's just like, this is where I'm at. Mm-hmm. You know, and it's just like, regardless of how they respond to it, it's just like, I'd rather hear the same thing coming back.
Yeah.
If it hurts me, or if it's something that it's just like, oh wow, I haven't been listening, or I need to work on something pretty hard, or it's something that's way more positive, and they give you one of the biggest compliments of your life because it's like you've been willing to open up and understand their side of the thing.
Yeah,
it's just like that. Well, Brene Brown had done several talks about that whole strength of vulnerability and success of failures and stuff like that. Like it's all these things that we're constantly taught that are bad for us. It's like we need these struggles to actually prove us to ourselves a lot of the time. Never mind the people that we're trying to connect with, because we're social creatures. You know, and I think that's where a lot of that stuff comes from, especially with relationship issues. It's like, if you can't be truthful with yourself, how are you going to be truthful with anybody else? And that's a huge one that
and I think that's why, you know, relationships, long-term relationships, like we were saying, like the statistics show, you know, that's what happens. And oftentimes why that happens is because people are making compromises where they shouldn't.
Yeah.
Certain connections, like this is something that I've also learned through exploring, you know, non-monogamy.
Yeah.
Is that certain connections are in more alignment than others. Doesn't mean that each connection doesn't have its own value to it and its own, like things that they bring to the table. But it doesn't mean that it's gonna be as like everyone's just gonna connect on different levels. That's what I found, and like through being honest, you just find that like you tend to gravitate towards the people that you have more alignment with, and can still connect with other people in different ways, even intimately, and still come back to that because it just feels so much more at ease in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and well, to the point too, if you start dating somebody, that you're not just allowed to, like a guy's not allowed to hang out with any girls once they start dating somebody. So it's like I'm only supposed to work with women, or work with men, I mean now. I'm only allowed to have male friends, I'm only allowed to do male activities.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's certainly not equality, because it's like you're my only female influence in my life other than my mom, maybe.
Yeah, and there's different ways in which resentment builds, like from making that type of compromise. But also, there's been like, I just recently, like through one of the connections that I made, this woman in her kind of early 40s that was expressing interest in me. We hung out, and a friend of hers was there that was male that just got a divorce. And she brought up the idea, the fact that like it was like bound to happen, because he loved going to the mountains, exploring all this stuff, and the wife loved staying at home.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting, because the thing is, like, if they were able to realize that their connection was still valuable to one degree, but it didn't have to be taken to the extent of commitment that it did based on societal pressure, like all kinds of different kinds of pressures, maybe they could have still gained the value from their connection and still continued to meet people that would have been more in alignment with each other's individuals.
It's not how we think, though, is the problem.
Yeah, that's what I mean, like those societal pressures, right? Because like when I think back of my, like, the most committed relationship that I've had, when we had that conversation, when it came up, my standards were almost like challenged in a way that I was made feel bad.
Yeah. Let's get into that in a second. I gotta use the bathroom.
Okay. Yeah, I love everything that's come out so far. It's been really, really good.
Yeah, I'm enjoying this, man. It's been it's always good to be able to just sit down and chat, honestly. So
I really like the way that, like, you challenge thought.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, because it really allows me to expand on certain things. Yeah, just, I don't know, like, it's been like, I've been making connections that I haven't necessarily made, like, in that specific way, just because of the things that you're bringing to the table as well, which is really cool.
Yeah, well, that's always the nice thing too, when you have a non-confrontational version of a conversation where you can allow some of those thoughts to kind of move and go, sort of thing. Because, well, even one of the podcasts I did, we were talking about, and it kind of just hit me as an epiphany while we were talking, and it was one of the longest ones I had done, or it is the longest one I had done. But we were like 3.5 hours in, and sort of thing like that, and it's like, do you think this woke movement, to a degree, is women's answer to the patriarchy? Being that they can't physically take things over, or even in certain levels of power structures. And she's like, ooh, geez, I don't know. It's like, kind of hits a nerve, so it probably means there's something there. And we kind of, she's like, we couldn't really discuss a whole lot about it further, but it was one of those things where it both hit us just like, huh. And just because the way that she had talked about how, like, similar things where women are more passive aggressive is where men are more direct confrontational
Yeah, it makes sense
certain
because
things, right?
we'll talk. Yeah,
Let's sit down.
And we're back. Yeah, so the question I just posed, I guess it would be a little bit of a diversion from where we were before. Unless you unless you want to keep going with your previous thought.
Where were we before? I think it's kind of related.
Kind of similar.
Because we were talking about like relationships and like men and women as well. It's like
larger society scale sort of thing where it was something that came as an epiphany that the whole start of the woke movement was kind of women's answer to the patriarchy. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, like kind of what we were kind of starting to get into is like definitely. I feel like, and that's part of the reason why when I say that when I refer to misandry being normalized, I refer to it as the third wave of feminism being infiltrated. Because they are in a sense continuing to do the work that benefits the people in power. Why is that the case? And I go back to something that Andrew Tate said. Men used to be the warrior class.
Yeah.
Men used to be the ones that risked their lives overthrowing unjust regimes.
Yeah.
And so, why does it benefit that misandry gets normalized? Because then men continue to be disempowered, men continue to be made weak physically, psychologically, emotionally, and then trauma gets perpetuated through that. Because like we said, men that don't have the ability to control their emotions, their desire, cause trauma.
Yep.
Even if in their heart, they might be great men. Because they don't know how to control their desire, because they don't know how to control their emotions, they amplify these animalistic parts of themselves that are almost like there's a way that David Data describes it in his books, where if we don't deal with our dark side, it comes out in certain ways. And that's just another way of saying if we don't know how to deal with our anger and our desire, it comes out in unhealthy ways.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
and
makes
so,
sense because life is about balance. Like too much of anything is not good for you.
yeah, and so what you were saying, like the women's woke movement, kind of what you labeled it as, is definitely women's response to fighting against the patriarchy, because the way that women deal with most kind of conflicts is not physical force. Where you're saying, even if it's not in the best way, it's not physical force. But it can be emotional abuse.
Yeah.
Instead of physical abuse, it can be emotional abuse. And that's the crazy thing about why we don't talk about female toxic females or whatever is because emotional abuse is not given sometimes the same ranking as physical abuse, and within like actual reason, because physical abuse can lead to someone dying, and it does.
Yeah.
So that's part of the truth that also has to be acknowledged in that context.
Yeah, for sure. And that's I think that's a big part of what it is that if we're talking about the issues with societies and stuff like that too, like we're all a part of them. Sure, there's been different times and layers of control and this, that, the other thing, but I mean, there's been no society that's been around forever, regardless of who's been in power. You know, there's lots of countries in the world that have had female leaders for decades, for centuries, for millennia, honestly. You know, so it's not like that's not a possibility. That's always been there.
Yeah.
Right, and it's like anything. It's the best person for the job that is the one that takes it. You know, and they talk about like it being an old boys club sort of thing like that too. But it's like, well, that's kind of a generalized sort of thing, and it's just like saying like the patriarchy in general. Is just like is that just like a nebulous term that you're just going to blame all men for all your problems?
I find it interesting that you bring this up because how we talked about how politics uses people's bias in order to gather votes.
Yeah.
That's been like putting a woman in power is just another one of those tools.
For sure.
Because this UCP leader is a woman.
Yeah.
But she's saying things that a conservative would say, regardless of their gender.
Yeah.
So they make the art like some Caucasian conservative women that are feminists look at the people arguing against the comments that she's been making in the first days of office, and they're like, oh, so you're criticizing a woman in power? Isn't this what you wanted?
Yeah.
And it's like, it doesn't matter.
Well, that's just it. It immediately turns it into like, we'll pick a side.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it goes back to the same thing.
Yeah.
Pick a side.
Yeah. Well, you're allowed to have more than one side. I mean, we're all very complex creatures. Even if you're like a simple person, you still have a ton of different shit going on in your life.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So yeah. That's basically what.
Yeah. I think that actually puts it pretty succinctly, because that's. Well, again, the issue being that we're drawing these artificial lines and, being mad at something that's not only not easily changed, but it's a nebulous term to say that it's like, well, this half of the population is the issue.
Mm-hmm.
All of us are the issue.
Mm-hmm.
Women are completely no blame on it.
Well,
or is there a little bit of nuance in between these things?
Yeah, that's why it was very interesting to me that after the Me Too movement, there was a not all men response, and then the not all men response, and I was kind of like almost an advocate of that, because it's like I've known a lot of men, and yes, a lot of what women are saying is true, but also that's not the whole truth.
Yeah.
And that's what I keep coming back to more than anything, because there's a point where I also was like, yeah guys, let's not say it's not all men, because that's not helping anyone. That's only creating more conflict.
Yeah.
It's kind of redundant to say, because it's like, that's not the point. The point is that this shit keeps happening on a massive scale and recreating trauma that is not fair on women, and not fair to ourselves even.
Well, the other funny part about that is, though, well, I don't know if funny is the right word, but there's also some women that are, for whatever reason, not attractive in a certain way, regardless of whatever that means, or they're just not in the right groups of people. Mm-hmm. Where it's like, I don't have a Me Too story. Nobody's ever actually hit on me or done anything sexual to me. It's like, I wish I had that kind of attention once in a while.
Mm.
And there's women that are like that, where it's never been an issue, and it's just like, oh yeah, all these pretty prissy bitches that are complaining about how hard their beautiful lives are. And it's it's tough being a gorgeous, 10 out of 10 kind of blonde.
Well,
let's.
And this is where that conversation of expanding our awareness and the wholeness of our truth becomes a hugely important issue that needs to be brought to the table. I think that that would help a lot of things, because pretty privilege is a thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It is.
know,
and it's not like it's a.
For guys, it looks different than women as well.
Yeah, but in general,
And
people like attractive people more.
Yeah,
in general, and we're all biased.
And that also creates a certain kind of tunnel vision based on their privilege, and that's why privilege has been also kind of a woke topic for but it's not been addressed in its fullest extent.
Yeah.
Because it's only been focused on the major types of privilege that have a negative effect on society.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's always more.
Well, the thing is too is that there's always again coming back to the differences in genders and stuff like that. The way we dress, like basically like a shorter haircut and a suit for a man has been in style for 150 years minimum, probably several centuries, truth be told. As where women's fashion changes daily, sort of thing, and it's something as simple as just the clothes we wear is enough to tear us apart, because, and the difference being that in a lot of avenues sort of thing, that women are constantly fighting at each other about who looks better in what dress, or they don't know how to match their shoes to their earrings or whatever kind of thing like that. As where guys just like, no, we all want to be the same. We don't want to have 250 different outfits. We want to have like 5 outfits. And I want to wear it better than that guy. He's going to wear exactly the same blue suit, but I'm going to look better in it because I have a better tailor or whatever. That's about as far as it goes. When it comes to clothing for men, and there's a lot of aspects of our lives where there's a lot of good things that the patriarchy have done. Quite literally, almost every building in this city has been built by men. Not saying that women didn't have nothing to do with it, but pretty close to nothing. Men build these things. They were always looked at as we're destroying and we're corrupting things constantly, and we do. But we also create. We just don't create life. We create things, because that's where our creation comes from. That's where we're allowed to, like whether it's art or it's music or it's like men are very
structures,
right. So there's like usual, like there's so
and
many,
that's like the creative
so
feminine part of men as well.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. Like there's so much more that we have in common. I mean, genetically, we're 99.99% similar. To each other. It's that 0.01% that really tears us apart for a lot of reasons. But it's again because we're the smartest things on the planet, so we have time to worry about shit. And because life has become so easy and comfortable, we start nitpicking at the little bullshit that honestly doesn't even matter half the time.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it has to do with how we identify. Like one of the things that we were talking about when you first came in, about how people grab on to these different labels as a way to not be in the space of uncertainty. And that's what prevents people from being like, I don't know how we were talking about earlier, but it was like, I feel like it's being comfortable with uncertainty just shows that you are more empowered.
Yeah, the whole strength of vulnerability kind of idea.
Yeah, it's directly correlated to that. Because if you're okay with uncertainty, then you're truly more grounded than someone that needs to hold on to something, some sort of identification, to feel like they know. And oftentimes that feeling of I know is like one of the reasons why people are like, I know better than you.
There's also it turns into a hierarchy.
So that's why in a sense I was thinking about it earlier, like in the back of my head, just how that's why Osho talks about courage begins when you're uncomfortable with uncertainty. Freedom begins when you're not trying to escape or run away from anything. That's a false sense of freedom.
Well, that whole sentiment about the truth will set you free. In a lot of ways, like sometimes the truth will put you into prison. Like the truth will seemingly do damage, sort of thing like that, but you're not fighting your own conscience at that point. You can free your mind for things that are actually important at that point, instead of lying to yourself and then lying to everybody else around you and then having to maintain those lies.
And if you notice, like just the way that you described that, because all throughout history, like the first asylums were not for people that were truly crazy.
No.
They were just people that opposed the establishment and the ruling at the time. And oftentimes, like, and even now, you can see the lineage of that, trying to control consciousness through everything that we've talked about.
Yeah.
The lack of investment in primary prevention methods, the infiltration of the third wave of feminism, all types of manipulating consciousness as a way to contain and maintain the structures of power that we have in place and have had in place for ages. Because we may have different tools at our hands, around our homes, in our cities, but we're still like functioning at a very similar level than we had years ago. We're still at war.
Yeah.
Because one person can, convince a group of people to convince a greater group of people that that land is ours.
Yeah.
And I am better than you, so I am going to take that.
Yeah.
And that's just one example of how we're still at a place where, like, that was what was happening years ago, centuries ago.
Oh,
I am better than you, I'm taking this land.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and if you're talking more specifically about the whole Russia thing, I mean, Russia's already the largest country in the world. Like, how much more land do you need?
Yeah, like, what is it going to change?
Yeah.
That you can say, I took that.
Yeah, it's so odd because the weird thing about a lot of that sort of stuff when it comes to larger sort of things where it's like I can kind of see the frustrations with, the bravado and the chest beating sort of thing like that. And, I'm going to show off my might and stuff like that, or I have look at my army, or look at my power, like how many buildings I can destroy or whatever. It's like, well, that's why people build walls. Quoting back Black Panther, like smart people don't build walls, they build bridges. Shouldn't you be working together so that you can be mutually beneficial? Aren't educated people more functional in society than, uneducated, starving people? Mm-hmm. Don't you want them to work with you to make you more money?
Yeah.
Make you more powerful if that's actually your gain? Mm-hmm. A lot of that stuff that I just don't understand a lot of it. And that's why I try not to follow politics as much as possible. It's difficult a lot of the time, or you hear something that's like, oh, god damn, I better look into this.
Yeah, like, that's bullshit, I gotta...
Yeah. But I mean, the Russia thing in particular, I stayed away from it. I mean, partly because it came right on the heels of the whole Freedom Convoy thing, and that was its own thing, but it was like, more importantly, that it was just like, the next day, World War III, or like Russia declares war on Ukraine, sort of thing like that, and it's just like, oh...
Here's the next thing.
Yeah, talk about more media manipulation and propaganda and shit like that. It's like, even the whole Freedom Convoy thing was...
Well, it reinforces
like
all the systems of power that are in place, because it gives people an opportunity to once again manipulate pride and fear as a way to gather votes, to gather Well, the other part is too is that regardless of who's sending money or munitions or whatever that's going on there, it's like, well, so what? So you can fight for peace? Isn't that like fucking for virginity? Like, that's a very good point.
What are we talking about when we're doing this?
Yeah.
And that's like an old hippie sentiment from the 60s.
Yeah.
But it's so true. It's just like, well, if you want to stop people dying, then stop fucking killing them. Let's sit down and talk like grown-ups. Are we not a civilized society?
Yeah.
Are we not like a unified planet at this point?
Yeah, and the crazy thing to me is that these men in power are convincing people to die for them, for their private interest.
Yeah.
It still blows my mind that none of these men, mostly, are like, why don't you go fight?
Yeah.
If you want this so bad, why aren't you here with me at the front, right there?
Yeah. That's why I don't like drones or guns or tanks or anything.
Oh yeah.
I like the idea, partly because I did sword fighting and stuff like that. But I mean, even just in general, if you're angry enough to kill somebody, look them in the eye. Stand there face to face, or no weapons at all, hand to hand. If you're that angry at somebody that you need to kill them, do it your fucking self.
Yeah.
You know, if it's not that big a deal, then again, sit down and talk about what the problem is.
Yeah. Yeah, this is actually interesting because it's one of the reasons why I like the movie Troy.
Yeah,
because
I was wondering if you could come in and bring it up.
Because Achilles like directly challenges the kings.
Yeah.
And is like, why are you not fighting?
Yeah, king fighting his own battle.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Exactly. Imagine that, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same concept, just like I allude to and say, like, it's the same lady wearing a different dress.
Yeah.
It's very, very similar. Just labels have been changed, a few things rearranged, made better, so that their game is better played by those involved, and so that they benefit more. And just look at the amount of wealth that they've created for themselves. It's insane. Like, some of the richest families and people in the world have an insane amount of wealth.
Yeah.
To the point where it brings this really good story about Lao Tzu to mind, and it's like explain this to the simplest way, but the most clear way possible. So Lao Tzu was invited to be part of the emperor's court at the time. And initially he was like, no, you don't want me to be in your court. And the emperor was, no, you're known for your wisdom, you're known for being able to just bring light to everything, every kind of conflict, so I want you to be part of my court. He was like, okay, I'll do it. The first issue that he had to deal with was a man stole a bunch of things from a very wealthy man. And so they both went to court, and what Lao Tzu did was he sentenced the thief to a certain amount of years, but then he also sentenced the wealthy man to the same amount of years that he sentenced the thief to. And the wealthy man was like, how can you do this? How is this fair? And he said, you've accumulated so much wealth, so many resources, that you have created lack for this man's life. And hence, the crime that happened is just as much your fault as the thief's fault.
Yeah.
And then the wealthy man went to the emperor and was like, you have to get this man out of court, otherwise, before you know it, you will also end up in jail. And that was the way Lao Tzu lost his job at the court of the emperor.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's just it. I mean, every time somebody gets to some position of power and is, distinguished from the rest, I mean, they also become a target right away then too.
Mm-hmm. And it's
so it's like, well, how valuable is success then? Because you have to deal with everything that comes with success.
And that's why laws and the political system are all made to protect those systems that keep those that have accumulated the most wealth in the place that they are.
Yeah.
And that's why no law has been made against that sort of thing. Because it's not made for everyone like they claim it is.
Yeah.
Democracy. It's not democracy.
Yeah, the protected class is the rich class.
Yeah, it's always been that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just become better at it.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I told you the analogy, and I've said this one several times already, but the idea of there's a pile of 1,000 cookies, and the rich man takes 999 cookies, the blue collar worker takes the last cookie, and the immigrant gets nothing. And the rich man says to the blue collar guy, hey, an immigrant's trying to steal your cookie. I heard that, and that's just like,
wow.
That is so unbelievably relevant and on the nose for kind of everything that we do.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And that's how people are manipulated, because then, fear is inflicted. It's like, he's going to steal your cookie. Oh shit, I don't trust him. I don't know if I can leave my cookie unprotected. Yeah. And then the rich man says, here, I'll provide protection if you support me in this way, and this way, and this way.
Yeah.
And then the blue collar guy is like, yeah, I can trust this guy, whereas I can't trust this guy.
Yeah.
So now there's enemy and savior been created just by the simple fact that the resources have been divided unevenly.
Yeah.
Because if every single one of those people got the same amount of cookies, if the rich man was like, he's trying to steal a cookie, you could be like, he's got enough cookies, I've got enough cookies, we're good, man. You can't convince me of that.
Yeah.
Right? It's a lot harder.
Yeah, but the problem is too is that it's not just 3 people.
Yeah, that's the reality in the analogy. Yeah, the reality.
Reality is there's billions of us,
exactly.
Right? So the thing is too is that if we wiped the slate clean and we gave every person on the planet was on the same monetary system, and we gave every person $10,000, let's say, I bet you by the end of the month there would still be millionaires and billionaires, and there would be some people that would be fucking broke. Mm-hmm. I almost guarantee it. It would only take about a month, I bet.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and that has different factors that play into that. Like,
for sure it does. But the thing is, when you told everybody this is exactly how it is. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like nobody has to pay bills for a year. Nobody has to do anything. Like, food is free for a year. Yeah. This $10,000 is for you to do what you want to do. We'll give you $10,000 a month every month without question. Yeah. How many people are going to go out and just fucking die from partying? Buying things that you're going to drive off a cliff with or something like that. Yeah. Some people will be like, let's see where this is going. Or it's like, you know, if you give me some of your money, we can work some things out. Maybe you don't have to worry about these other people that might be taking stuff from you. You know, and all of a sudden it's just like, again, it would fall back into the whole, some people would be security guards, some people would protect people with the money.
And in order to prevent that, there would have to be so much social work involved to
the point of tyranny, to keep it even.
To a certain degree, but like, I mean, there's a point where, like, if that money was controlled, in that example that you're giving, because I'm like, maybe there's some potential here for growth. Yeah. Because the thing is, like, if you were able to give people that amount of money, but also create a condition that you have to go through this process to be able to access that money, and that involved being like a certain kind of test to figure out where you are in your life, where you are emotionally, psychologically, economically, in all aspects of your life, and then you had to, like, pass a course, for example, like as a simple example to simplify, right? Yeah. Because it might involve, factors that have to be more specifically targeted, right? But let's just, for the sake of playing with the idea, if a course, you had to pass a course to access a certain amount of money, let's say like a money management course, let's say, like, depending on where you are in your life, that would determine the way in which that course that you have to pass is built as well. Like, let's say you have a problem with substance abuse. Yep. Then you have to pass a sobriety course and, like, be able to be held accountable to your sobriety to access that money. And in that sense, different people in different situations are given the tools in order to be able to use that money wisely. And then that becomes like an avenue for growth, right? Yeah. So yeah, that's the way that I like to play with ideas in that sense, because it's like, yes, there's truth in what you're saying. Of course, it would be a gong show. It would be a gong show if there was no control, no primary prevention methods applied to that. But if there were the proper primary prevention methods applied, it could be a huge avenue for growth. Yeah. Think about how motivated people would be to leave drugs if they could get sober and access this huge amount of money.
Yeah. The other side of it is, though, too, is that you're taking pretty much all of certain people's wealth from them and their security, and they would still have their mansions, they would still have their 15 other houses out around the world, whatever sort of thing like that. They could still fly to them. I mean, with $10,000, I mean, you would think that, I mean, there's a lot of factors, but the thing is, like, as soon as you say that the slate is even and clean for everybody, it would turn into a fucking war. Because the people that have been oppressed their whole lives, it's like, oh, we're just square now all of a sudden, and the people at the top are saying, it's like, I'm like, these fucks? There's no fucking way it would work. Humanity would step in, and our true nature would be really revealed at that point.
Well, the nature of the elite, I feel like, would be really, really revealed. Yeah. In that context. Yeah. because it would be mostly them trying to secure their wealth. Yes, there would be like resentment that would probably be expressed.
For sure.
But yeah, there would be. Yeah. But yeah, it would be mostly also them trying to protect the things that they've built through the lineages of systems of oppression that they've created to gather that wealth.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, that would not be the best way of dealing with that. It would have to be addressed in a way more systematic way that addresses those primary prevention methods in the context which already are said to be made to address those kind of issues.
Yeah.
Which is education for the most part.
For sure. Well, the other part of it is though too is that as good as it would be to help people that all of a sudden didn't have the money or didn't have whatever connection, because a lot of times addiction and stuff comes from the lack of connection. It doesn't come from actual addiction to the substance itself, regardless of what it is.
Yeah.
There's some people that would definitely get off of whatever they're doing and they'd be able to afford things that they want to be able to do. The other part of it is too is that people have way more money than they did before. And it's just like I can just get fucked up all day now and don't even worry about it.
Yeah.
I can still just go and buy whatever food or have it shipped to me because the world's that convenient now.
Yeah.
Right, so that's why it's a fun thought experiment, because there's no fucking way it would work.
Yeah, I mean, in a perfect world,
Well,
yeah,
exactly, in a perfect world, what does that even mean?
Yeah,
right.
In like a world that we can imagine.
Yeah. So that's
and
it's interesting.
And that's why, like, to a certain degree, like, it's not about money. Like,
No.
when you really get down to it, like, making progress is not about money. And what the elite of the world don't realize is that, like, we're getting to a point where the truth is emanating from the fact that it's just consciousness nature to expand and grow, and we're getting to a point where, like, the world is like at a tipping point where you can see billionaires purchasing more bunkers because they're just taking precautions. Yeah, they're worried. They're like, people are getting to a point where, like, they're getting hard to manage. They're getting enough truth that if a lot of them get access to it at the rate that we're headed towards a decline in resources and like the ability to manage resources effectively, it's like a combination for chaos.
Yeah.
Right? But what they also don't realize is, like, a very key concept in Troy that I mentioned in my book. I find it like hilarious, because the reason why Achilles chooses to go to war instead of staying home is eternal glory.
Yeah.
The fact that his name will live on. And then you look at the king and the argument that he makes to Achilles. He's like, warriors' names don't go down in history. Kings' names go down in history.
Yeah. Who is the king?
Agamemnon.
I know. I know. Yeah. But compared to Achilles, nobody knows. I mean, part of our body is named after.
Yeah, exactly.
Achilles, right? So,
exactly. And people would probably be able to. Most people wouldn't know what king that was speaking.
Yeah.
Because there is certain truth to that, but it's not the absolute truth. And so, what the wealthy don't realize is, like, their name could go down in history.
Yeah.
Their name could go down in history if they chose to step in and be able to fund ideas like investing in primary prevention methods in schools with all the research that we've done into behavioral sciences.
Yeah.
And making reforms to politics that benefit the masses, because that would put people on their side at a point where people are like, who are the people that people are going to go against the most when shit hits the fan? The most wealthy, because they have the most resources.
Yeah.
It's an obvious, and that's why they're buying underground bunkers as well.
Yeah, because depending on the level of revolution, money won't matter.
Exactly, and it doesn't matter. That's like, you know, it's not about money.
That was the history of the French Revolution, because these people were so poorly taken care of, and the rich and the elite were so far beyond and not just physically, but literally above everybody else in their towering castles and stuff like that. They couldn't see the problems that were down beneath them until they started walking around with torches and burning people at the stake and doing all these things. And they revolted. And that's a group of uneducated, straight up uneducated, starving people that had enough. And to this point, France, has got pretty high taxes, but the people are taken care of. Because it was a strong enough lesson learned hundreds of years ago. And it said, oh, we can't do this to people, can we? And yet here we are, doing it again anyways.
Yeah, in more subtle and intelligent ways. That's why, I say it's just they've just gotten better at doing it and more subtle about it. But they're still keeping people in asylums to a certain degree. But the asylum is not really a physical place necessarily anymore.
Yeah,
it's like
it's here.
It's here. Yeah, it's like people are being caged in here, and it's interesting that it's like the conversations led to this point because. I had a sound instructor when I went to ACAD, and the talk of the Third World War came to the conversation. That topic came to the conversation, and so he said that he had heard that someone described the Third World War as being who gets ownership of people's minds rather than a necessarily physical world war. And to a certain degree, that's what's been going on this whole time, because the systems of oppression have now become almost entirely mental, even though there's still systems of oppression that are completely physical as well.
That is the like you said. That's the big part about it is that they're not dumb. They've been ruling the world and manipulating us through whatever levels of propaganda or targeted us to attack each other a lot of the time for that sort of thing. But they all know it is a house of cards. So they just don't want to be at the top of that house
when it falls. Exactly. So that's what I find interesting about people bringing up the fact, all these billionaires are buying underground bunkers. It's some people have been trying to get people to clue in to what's going down, and every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Yes, energy can't be created or destroyed, but it's always going to transform, and it's going to transform due to the consistency of action that is put on one end of the spectrum and the process that it takes to get to the other and then cycle back, because it's all in cycles. And when it comes to life on this earth.
And the thing is, we're doing it to ourselves more now than ever, because before, when it was kings and queens, it was I'm ordained by God. God said that I should be ruling because the rest of you are beneath me and you need to be subjugated by me. As we're doing it to ourselves far more, as where we've given Jeff Bezos $200 billion. It's we put him on top on purpose. So why wouldn't he think he's better than us? Why wouldn't he buy, a rocket to just boogie around in, or buy however much resources and stuff like that? Because of course he would. Why wouldn't he?
Yeah.
We told him he's worth it.
Yeah.
Every time everybody bitches about it, but it's my Amazon package is
and now this actually brings another side of the coin that it relates completely to how people make choices, and what we talked about in terms of incentivizing someone to do something. Of course men are going to continue to be disempowered if someone continues to say you're trash, you're garbage, you're all this negative stuff. They're not going to get empowered. And in the same way, if we continue to be to the elite in a certain way as well, you're the problem, you should own this much stuff. The people like him, for example, that came from almost nothing, they're I work for this. You're telling me I have to give up all my stuff that I worked really hard for, because I'm sure he worked really hard for, and there's stories about how some people that came from nothing are now billionaires. Why would that be a logical way of getting something. It's not a logical way of getting something out of anyone.
Yeah.
And that's where this concept of eternal glory becomes interesting, because it's like, why don't we tell them this? Why don't we use a different kind of approach to get things from people, basically?
Well, on that same token, what do you think about Elon Musk? Being that he's a billionaire, but he's actually doing something for the future of humanity? Or just in general, what do you think of the guy? Because I find he's different.
Yeah, he's an interesting manifestation of wealth.
Yeah.
Because in a lot of senses he is doing the things for the future of humanity, and he loves talking about that. And like a huge aspect of that for him is like space travel, because for him it like gives him hope that humanity is striving for something greater than itself. But that argument in itself is like, why are you looking to colonize other planets if you haven't really fixed what's wrong with this one yet? Like, what we're gonna do is just bring the same problems to that planet. It's like someone that like hopes that they get out of a toxic relationship and they don't do any type of work on themselves, and they hope that the next relationship is gonna be like the best, and they just continue to repeat the same cycle with the other person.
I didn't even take any time. I was like a week between relationships.
Yeah, exactly. Right? But they're like, oh no, it's all good. They were the problem, right? And so it's like the same idea. So like, I appreciate a lot of things about Elon Musk. He's a very inspiring individual in the sense that in the way that he handles his purpose, and the way that he doesn't talk, but he does.
Yeah. And
the way that he aligns his actions with his words to a certain degree, right?
Well, he's very thoughtful in the sense that he doesn't just instantly answer. Whenever he's asked a question, he sits and thinks about it for 10 seconds, sometimes even, where you're listening to a podcast that he's on, and it's just like, is it still on? Oh, it's still on. But because he takes the time to consider what it is that he's responding to, and how to weigh it properly in certain ways. And I mean, he's still a person. I mean, he's got his own whatever hang-ups and stuff like that too. Right, yeah, he's still a person. Yeah, regardless of what happens or anything like that. But I agree. I mean, I think he's one of the few billionaires that we can point to that's actually doing anything with his money for humanity.
Yeah, and there's been like a few billionaires that have turned around and been like, I want to put this money towards benefiting the world, and they have gotten, this is the interesting part, because they've gotten a lot of praise. And they have, to a certain degree, have some sort of access to that quote-unquote eternal glory.
Yeah.
But the interesting part is also like the other side of that, because they've gotten also hate.
Yeah.
Because there's always a way to find, something. But it also, like, it goes to show that, like, there's always a force trying to minimize or downgrade the great things that people do sometimes in order to maintain what is.
Yeah.
Because who do you think would want to make a billionaire that is trying to benefit the world with his money look bad?
Yeah.
Probably other billionaires that don't want to do the same, and they have the means to do that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, his stock went down by like 4% or something when he took a puff of a joint when he was on Joe Rogan's podcast at one point.
Yeah.
And it's just like, how does that even make sense? And then it's like, well, he's all tied into all these military contracts and stuff, and they're drug-free sort of thing like that. And, there's this whole religious thing that goes on with not smoking grass or whatever sort of thing. This,
purity, holiness, betterness.
Right, and it's just like, oh yeah, then, white man talking to another white man about how to fix all the world's problems sort of thing like that. Who the fuck is Elon Musk guy anyways? He's got time to just fuck around with Joe Rogan or whatever and smoke weed and this, that, and the other thing. It's like, holy. Never mind the rockets, the reusable rockets that he's making, or, he's trying to make better transportation systems underground, or he's trying to do all these other fucking things that are like revolutionary. And Well, even going to make a moon base or something on Mars. I mean, it's entirely possible that we'll figure out how to do things better there. And it's like, well, why are we doing this just here? We should have been applying this to the Earth in the first place.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and there's like the technologies out there, like the Venus Project. Jack Fresco, I've mentioned him a few times. He's another guy that's been doing a lot of work towards that. He was an engineer that worked for a bunch of major engineering companies as well as his work on like kind of like reality engineering. This is kind of what he did as well, like create a reality in his world that he could then manifest because he knows how to build the technology to do that. Yeah, he's built the cities of the future basically.
Yeah.
And they already have a prototype like built in Florida where they bring people to show them kind of like how it would look like in a small scale.
Yeah.
Enough to be able to show people, but
I think they built one of those in the Middle East as well. It's supposed to be for like 40,000 people or whatever, and it's got like all running like all self-driving electric vehicles, and like it's fucking amazing technology and structures that are built there.
So we can do so many things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, it's the whole money and power thing.
Yeah.
Right. That's always the unchanging thing because we have the technology easily to build a moon base already.
Yeah.
But who's going to get rich off of that?
Yeah. No. And so, the way that they control it, like it is like in the cookie analogy, like the way that they like tell the blue collared man like he's looking to grab your cookie is they control the economy in order to make it so that specific part of people that fall under that category of wealth stay within survival mode enough so that even if people are thinking great things, amazing things that could bring progress, value to society, they have no means of realizing that because they have two jobs trying to find joy in life
and so just feed their children
and feed themselves, their children, whatever, you know. So it makes it so that people stay within that bracket of wealth so that they can be like, hey, that guy's trying to steal your cookie.
Yeah. Well, I'm always torn about this because it's like it would be nice if things would be a little bit easier in certain ways. But with that said, it's like if money or something else wasn't driving us to be better or to innovate or to try harder, there would be less happening because I mean we have 12 to 16 hours a day that we're awake.
Yeah.
Depending on your age, sort of thing like that. But if you're not filling your time with something, it's like we wouldn't have all the things that we have. Is the other part, you know?
Yeah.
It's unfortunate that even sometimes like war is what helps innovate and actually create better technology sometimes. But it's like why does it always have to go to the extremes to get better first?
Yeah,
or
exactly.
To get better afterwards. I mean,
exactly. Yeah. And that's the thing. Like when we go to extremes, like playing with thoughts. Like for example, like when we talked about giving everyone, a certain amount of money.
Yeah.
The reason why like that is a fun thought experiment, but at the end of the day we're both like, yeah, that wouldn't work, is because it's not using the systems in place in order to work from that. And that's where like I feel like the biggest growth can be made in using the systems that are in place in order to work from that. And that's why I don't say let's change all of education when I say let's reform the education system.
Yeah.
I'm saying let's just add a class called self-development.
Yeah.
We don't have to change everything about it. We don't have to transform the way that teachers teach. We don't have to transform the way that classrooms are built, the way that schools are built, which we could.
Yeah.
Add new technologies, blah, 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 which we could.
Yeah.
But it would be way more drastic change than just being like, let's just add a course called self-development and add some things that we've gathered through our studies of behavioral science into it to empower people in the areas of self-esteem, having a healthy self-identity, creating healthy relationships, and healthy communication. Because all targeting those three things would address a lot of things that lead people to be easily manipulated into situations that are not healthy, and that could go like like in the immediate context of relationships of like the people in their immediate lives, but also being manipulated at a greater level politically speaking. Because I kind of mentioned slightly, it was my own responsibility that I let myself be guilt tripped into stopping to hang out with my female friends.
Yep.
Why? Because I still had to do work on myself and my self-worth, my self-identity, and be like, this is not healthy.
Yep.
And that works at a greater scale as well. If we're not able to say this is unhealthy, and we're like, we co-caged each other into these situations, it's like we're not gonna get anywhere.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, because that's the other part too. Is there's a lot of people that instead of bringing themselves up, they'd rather bring everybody down to their level.
Yeah. So that's why a very practical way to create transformation would be to that's a very practical way to create change. To just add that primary prevention method in the form of a course added to any school curriculum.
Yep.
Called self-development that focuses on those three main areas. And then certain things like that could be done with systems like the political system that in a very practical way could use the systems that are already in place but only interjecting certain things that would then create a greater change and a more natural and practical transformation that is not like, let's give everyone $10,000 kind of thing, right?
Yeah, but I mean, therein lies the problem already, though. Too, is that you're talking about change. Mm-hmm. Some people don't want change either, right? So that's kind of the other side of that thinking sort of thing too. Again, partly because there's some people that are comfortable in their lives and they like how things are. Some people think that no, this is as good as we're ever going to get anyway. So it's just like, well, it isn't though.
Yeah. I think that I have hope. Because I'm able to create spaces like kind of this space where like we can have different points of view and find the truth within both of those. And so that's what gives me hope that I can create that and perhaps like just by me creating that, other people can create that in their lives as well. Because this is kind of the point in consciousness that we're coming to, that like I've had conversations with conservatives and I can open their minds to certain things. Certain things they're more attached to, but there's certain things that I can challenge them on and they're like, oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah, well, like we said too, we all have more in common than we have differences.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's no reason why these things can happen. Well, that's why, like, talking to people like you, or like, you're a vegan, you're far more on the left than I am. I'm still consider myself on the left not compared to what everybody else would call me, I'm sure, but but even then though too, it's because I don't want to live in an echo chamber.
Yeah,
I want to have a better idea of how functional ways of thinking and doing things are possible. It's not just like, well, we should do this. It's like, okay, but how?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I don't have that part figured out. It's like, okay, well, it's a good idea, but let's be practical about it, because every time we have an idea, like, the human element is what ruins it. Like, honestly, like the big one I remember in the 80s, save the trees, use plastic bags. I remember that from being a kid. And what happened? The idea that it takes so much energy to cut trees down, turn them into pulp and paper for carrying things or whatever. And it's just like, it's way cheaper, way easier, way more efficient to use plastic bags. You can make hundreds or thousands of them for the same price it is to make 10 paper bags. The reality is humans are lazy as fuck. whatever scientist or ecologist or whoever economist or environmentalist forgot that element in their equation is that people are fucking lazy and we're messy, which is a huge problem now because it's not like plastic bags are even really recyclable properly. You know? And, don't get me wrong, I mean, we live here in Alberta where it's not like you throw a straw away and it instantly goes into a sea turtle's nose or something, you know, or a plastic bag doesn't just, you know, end up in a bird's nest or something necessarily either. But the idea that we're all able to do better is a good thing. But we have to be realistic about who and what we are as a group. And the thing is that what I wanted to get kind of to as well is that having this conversation with environmentalists or whatever, saying the idea is that, you know, every person can do better. It's like, yes, the individual, and a lot of us do. I mean, a lot of us use 3 bins at our homes, or, you know, we have specific places where we put and separate our garbages and stuff like that. That's great. But let's not pretend something like a corporation or a government isn't its own type of organism. It's maybe not a living creature, but it has its own agendas. You know, and all the people that work for a government or for a large corporation or for whatever type of entity, they're all just small pieces that throw their hands up. It's like, well, you know, there's diffusion of responsibility. Like, how can I change the entire company? Thinking of it more that a government is more like a human's body. You know, you can't live without your heart, right? But it's like, your heart isn't the only thing that makes you a human though either. Every other part of your body is what all makes you a human. So it's like hundreds or thousands of pieces, depending on how you want to break a person up, is what makes a person. Well, hundreds and thousands of pieces are what make up a government. So sure, no one of those people can do anything with it. But the government itself wants to do the best it can. It wants to thrive, it wants to take care of itself. Sometimes it has to protect itself from invasions or what we would consider a virus or something like that. And sometimes that virus is direct and you can see, like a cut on your hand would be, you know, like being attacked by another country. Sometimes it's a thought virus where we have propaganda or a way of thinking that's being taken over. And that's a harder virus to fight now. And all of a sudden a government is being infiltrated, or a country's been infiltrated by different thoughts and ideas and campaigns and stuff now. So we have to think about us as a singular superorganism, not just the individuals.
Definitely.
You know, and I think that's a big thing that we
and the thing is, like, creating a space where, like, people can have those conversations with opposing views is where we realize that we're more alike to each other than we think. Because like, that's what they don't want us to do. They want us to keep us divided. They want us not realizing that we all want very similar things, and they're just manipulating different groups into fighting with each other so that we don't have those conversations, so that we don't bring down those walls that we put up, and we don't unify against the systems that really oppress us all. Instead of just thinking that, oh, they're just oppressing us, oh, they're just oppressing us. No, you're the ones that like need more oppression, but we need more liberation. It's like, come on, guys, like, let's all just realize what's going on here. And let's have a conversation and unite in a way that truly benefits everyone, rather than just the few that are, like, making us puppets and, like, making us fight each other.
Well, that's why I wonder too, is like, would an alien invasion actually, like, unify us as a species? And I wonder that too, because there's some times where it's like there'd be lots of people that'd be willing to be traitors just so that they could get the upper hand. You know, like, I'd rather be a pet than a slave, kind of thing. You know. So it's tough because, well, especially now because we're also very divided. It's like some people, it's like, yep, at least somebody will tear this fucking institution down. You know, so it's like, is there a good or bad way of looking at some of this shit? Because it's like, would we actually unify properly, or is that just a pipe dream in general? That, you know, with the nice thing about social media being that we're able to get at all of our thoughts, and it's a fucking cesspool right now. But it's like, hopefully, because we have more interconnection, we can grow as a society together better.
I think that it would have to be, like, true empowerment that would lead us to a point where, like, if the leader of the movement died, the idea itself would continue by itself.
Yeah.
Because of the merit of its clarity and intention.
It'd get corrupted eventually.
Well, yeah. I mean, like, you know, Christianity is a great way of showing that, right? And ideally, keyword ideally, the idea that would be able to withstand that type of manipulation would have that in mind already.
For sure. Yeah.
So that's like the only way in which I feel like we could truly unify, if it's in a way that it's not like a localized kind of movement, but it's more of a universal type of accessible
religious level sort of thing where we'd all actually be striving to the same goal. Is that, I mean, part of it was for control, but it was part of it, religion was just for us to stop killing each other. Mm-hmm. It's just like, yeah, there's this idea of something that's gonna, you know, fuck your life up or whatever, sort of thing like that. So it's like, as much as we want to like enslave people or do it to a handful of people's benefit, mm-hmm. sort of thing like that, it's like at the same time, we've been able to live in cities of 1 million people because of some level of indoctrination, because we all have like a goal that we've been driving to. Mm-hmm. As we're, you know, 2,000 years ago or something like that, thousands of years ago before that, even before mm-hmm. we started having any general idea of what a religion was. Mm-hmm. It's like we were all just small tribes of murderous savages, basically.
Yeah, I know. And so I kind of want to bring it back around to something before we maybe call it.
Yeah, we're getting closer. We're at 2:15 about for time. So yeah, it's going to be kind of a long conversation already, but it's good now.
Yeah, no, it's so good. And I just want to bring it back to like the power of vulnerability, and the power of also compassion, because we usually think that there's strength in anger. Also, we tend to feel powerful when we're angry.
Yeah.
And that's why we oftentimes also, you know, not just because like our frontal lobe like kind of shuts down, but also it makes us feel powerful to be able to hurt another to a certain degree, if we're like truly honest about it. Like, I'm like hurting you, and I like have this force, right? It's like a very powerful presenting energy.
Yeah.
But physiologically, you are losing control. So that is actually you losing power, because your control is your true power. If you lose control, you're losing your power.
Yeah.
So in that sense, compassion, and this I'm not coming up with this. I saw this in a TED Talk.
Okay.
Given by a guy that focuses on anger issues and that kind of thing. And so he talks about compassion being the true strength, because in having compassion, we can remain in control. Like, we can not shut off our frontal lobe, hopefully, and not just having compassion for the other, but having compassion for yourself first, first and foremost. Because if you let yourself not regain that control before you re-engage in whatever situation made you angry, you're allowing yourself to lose control. You're allowing to bring into the world a lesser version of yourself. And hence, having compassion for yourself is saying, yes, I'm allowed to feel these feelings, but having compassion for myself also means taking a step back and allowing myself to be fully in control, fully in my power, so that I can bring the most value to this interaction.
Yeah.
For myself and for the other.
Well, and that just shows a level of emotional maturity as part of it, because I mean, well, I mean, small children in particular, they don't have a lot of thought. They live on emotions for the most part. You know, that's why they have temper tantrums. That's why they're screaming with joy. That's why they're always so much more expressive than adults are. You know, and it's partly because we calm down and stuff like that as we get older, and there's a certain level of respectability that comes out of not just having emotional outbursts, good or bad, a lot of the time, which is part of it. But also it's partly because our cognitive brain is functioning better. We should be able to think and talk and not just have emotional reactions, like you say, and anger in particular, because it's very empowering. You know, and it's more than emotion even, like physiologically, I mean, your adrenaline starts kicking up, like
so it feels empowering.
You actually become stronger. You know, you have a stronger ability to actually do damage. You know, so that thing is, if you're not putting it into your fist, you're putting it into your words. And all of a sudden that your words become way more biting and stuff like that, is where you could have said the same thing calmly, more effectively, instead of making opposition and then forcing people into, it's like, well, you think you're the authority, that means you think you're better than me, or I'm being subject to your ideas or whatever, sort of like that sort of thing. No, we should work together.
And so that's why I kind of wanted to bring it back to this, the power of vulnerability and the power of compassion, because that's one of the most practical ways in which we can create these conversations that can then lead to those agreements, those deeper understandings that would lead us to potentially unify more as humanity, and be able to actually unify for the purposes of benefiting everyone and not just a few.
That's a good place to end, right there. Bam! Stab it. Perfect. Awesome. Thanks, man. That was good. Real good.
Right? I think we're getting better at this.
I like it.
Oh man.
Sweet.
Yeah, no, that was great.
No, that was good. There was of course, like usual, there's a handful of things I wanted to talk to you, but it's like, well, it took 2 hours just to get through like emotions and the difference between men and women.
Yeah, I know, and I think that those are all like, they're the great entryway for like a lot of deeper conversations from a more compassionate and open place. Because that's what we're doing. Like we're saying like, yes, this is true, but this is also true. And this truth, the rest of this truth, is also benefiting the part of the truth that you're focusing on, kind of thing. Because that's exactly what's happening with like this war between the sexes. It's like people not being willing to see each other's side more wholesomely and more.
Well, and the realistic thing about it too is that it's not my truth or your truth. Truth is objective. It is singular. Right? One of the few things that we can say that's not on a spectrum in reality. Your thoughts, your emotions, your feelings, your opinions, those can be whatever. The truth is the truth, though. Let's not try to pretend like there's a difference on that one. So
and it's beyond you and I. It's beyond.
Well, and like anything that has that type of power, it's neither good nor bad. Power in general is something that is up to the user.
Definitely. I'm gonna have to wash them again.